I'm here at the Stanford GSB today to talk to a bunch of students about one, the best types of companies to work for in fintech, two, the best kinds of roles to work at fintech companies. Hint, it's not product. And three, if you want to break into venture, what that looks like. Should be a lot of fun. So number one, what kind of company to join? So if any of you have seen this, it's from about 10 years ago. You'll notice it's written by Andy Ratcliffe, but Andy's the founder of Benchmark. He basically lays out the best kind of company to join is a mid-sized company with growth. And the logic is if you join a company that's called 40 to 50 people growing 2-3x year over year, you're getting to a company that's going to do really interesting work where the org is expanding, where your ability to take on new and interesting work expands, and then you get to borrow from the brand credibility of having worked at a fast-growing organization. And so if you can find companies like that to work for, you should very much go and work for them. And the reason why I say I think you guys are really lucky is that if you go back 3 or 4 years ago, how did you identify these companies was actually pretty hard because you'd be like, there are so many companies raising rounds. There are 700 unicorns. Like, which one of those are good companies? It's a really hard question to answer as an investor when you have all of the information. It's almost impossible as a student. You're like, well, they're a billion-dollar company, but maybe they're like too late, or maybe their unit economics aren't very good. Now that we live in a down market, any company that has raised a follow-on round of financing in the last 12 months, kind of Series B or later, is default a very good company. Whereas 3 years ago, there's a big question, are they good companies or not? And then two, just another tactical thing I want to cover is what kind of roles I think are really interesting to work in the tech ecosystem. I know when I used to talk to my friends who are doing business school, they'd be like, I was like a banker or I was a consultant and like, I know I can't be an engineer, so I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a product person. I don't think product is a very interesting role. And I don't mean that holistically. I mean that in a precise way relating to where we are in the cycle of the types of companies being built. So if you think about the most important person inside of a company, it's actually not inside of your company. The most important person for your company is your customer. And therefore, the most important org inside of your company is going to be whoever understands and hears the voice of the customer. So if you fast forward and you think about some companies being tech-driven companies where they're selling a technical product to a technical buyer, the most important organization is engineering, because engineering is going to be actually usually talking closely to another person in engineering at the buyer, and they understand what they need, why they need it, and then how that relates to what they should be building. So when I was a software engineer working in and around fintech, one of the companies I worked for was Checker. One of the reasons I joined them is like, we're selling a technical product, we're selling an API to other engineering organizations. I want to work in an organization where engineering is the core organization because I am an engineer, right? So I think it can make sense to work in other orgs depending on your skill set. That's tech companies. You also have product companies. If you look at a lot of really successful fintech companies, a lot of them historically have been consumer. So they're selling to individuals, and their product has a really important role. Product is the one who's monitoring the downloads, monitoring all the interactivity. They're the ones who interacting and engaging with users and usually doing that through onboarding funnels, all that sort of stuff. So product can have really important roles inside of consumer fintech companies. But where I see, and like I mentioned before, I've done 28 investments out of Fund 1 so far. I have maybe 2 or 3 companies that are B2C, so selling to consumers. Most of them are B2B or B2B2C, and they are not product companies. They are not tech companies in the sense they're not selling a technical product to a technical buyer. They are a solutions company. They're selling a complex enterprise solution to an enterprise buyer. And the organization that is most important for those companies is sales engineering, customer success. And I think that's great because if you come from a consulting or a banking or even a non-technical background, you actually have a lot to offer in terms of understanding how to do the positioning, how to listen to the customer and the buyer, understand what they need. And I think these are going to be the most interesting companies of the next 10 years are going to be these solutions-oriented companies. And so if you're sitting around here and you're I want to work in fintech and maybe I'm not an engineer, what should I do? Maybe you should still think about product, but I really would encourage people to work in sales, solutions engineering. It's because you get to understand the consumer you get to understand the voice of the customer and the buyer. And there are a lot of really big, interesting companies being built in this area right now. And so what that will mean is because there are so many other companies, if you get really good at complex enterprise sales and solutions and go-to-markets, you've developed a really, really valuable career skill set that's very defensible and can help you move between organizations over time. Because once you figure out how to sell a $10 million enterprise sales contract and you do that at a company that's growing 2-3x year over year, anytime someone else is doing big complex enterprise sales and growing faster, and be like, I want to find someone else who's done that before. And you'll be like, I've done that before. And that is a great thing to stack in your careers. You have one company and another company and another company. So really highly encourage people to just recognize that solutions are a thing being sold. And another way to think about it is tech is eating through the world right now. So it used to be kind of standalone and isolated. Now it's getting integrated into everything in our daily lives. And to do that, you have to move from just being these standalone, isolated environments. Like Facebook is just a web page where you enter into information to actually maybe you're migrating the payroll system for Walmart because you need to pass out new and better benefits to both the employees and some other people. And that's a very complex enterprise thing. So as we move tech into the real world, there's just going to be a lot more solutions work. And then 3, in terms of how to break into venture, if we tie together the other stuff that we already talked about, one is just move to the Bay Area. This is the densest tech ecosystem in the world. A lot of you have already done, well, all of you have already done that because you're here at the GSB, so that's one check. 2, we already talked about joining a mid-sized company with growth. If you want to go directly into venture and have not worked at a tech company, I think it's a bad idea because you should get that operational experience. It'll make you more marketable as a venture investor. It'll help you understand more how the entire ecosystem works. And it's also going to give you a network and give you some credibility with potential groups. So I think you have to do that. And then 3, if you still really do, you also, the biggest thing is you might learn that you really love building things. And that's great. If you love building things, don't go and become a venture investor. Instead, keep building things. If you do join a mid-sized company with growth, things work out really well, 2 to 3 years in, then what you can start thinking about is, okay, now I joined the company, it was 50, now it's 300 people. My friends are starting to leave companies. I'm going to give them angel checks. Some of my friends have maybe left to join venture firms. I'm going to network with them. We're going to share deal flow. And so it's going to be all about building and maintaining networks. Some of you are kind of already here because you've already worked at scaled fintech companies and maybe you've even been at them relatively early. And so the tactical bit of advice I would give you if you're kind of already at that stage and thinking about doing venture is first, just make sure it's something you really want to do because venture, there's a lot of grunt work. There's cold outreach, there's a lot of sourcing, there's a lot of positioning, putting together materials. I think it is less fun in many ways than actually building a company. So just really make sure you're interested in the shape of the work. But then tactically, if you do want to break into it, one of the best ways to do is to demonstrate your ability to source really interesting companies. And the best way to do that is build a network of other investors. And the best type of investors to build relationships with is not the most senior person, the most senior who will pick your call, but the most junior person who has just joined a firm who also wants to build their own network over time. And so you basically look up the top 10 firms you think are good at investing, or top 20 or 30, and you try and find somebody who's joined in the last 6 months, and you send them a cold email and say hey, I want to chat, here's what I'm seeing, what are you seeing? And you start doing that for 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden, those people start to rise, they get promoted. So that is the very tactical, simple bit of advice in terms of breaking into ventures. One, do all this other stuff, which takes 2 to 5 years. And then if you still want to go into the venture side of things, think about a very tactical way of building networks within the venture ecosystem. So that's a wrap for part 1 of the talk, where we covered 3 things. 1, what kind of company to join? Mid-sized company with growth. 2, what kinds of roles to look for when you're joining a company. And the hint there was, don't just look at product. Make sure you consider customer success, sales, and solutions, because for companies with enterprise go-to-markets, those are really meaty and important roles. And then 3, how to break into venture if you decide that's something you want to do, which is basically how to build your network. And we got into some of the tactical ways to do that in the video. If you want to continue and go a little deeper, part 2, I answer a bunch of questions from folks in the audience about specific kinds of companies, specific areas of opportunity in fintech, and more. So make sure to either hit subscribe or to find the link to that video in the show notes. Thanks so much, and maybe I'll see you on that one.